Rapture was built at the bottom of the sea somewhere in the middle of the Atlantic Ocean in 1946 by Andrew Ryan as Utopia, so that art, industry, and science would go about undisturbed by government and people who would leech off of the leaders in those fields. Rapture was designed to be entirely self-supporting, with all of its electricity, food production, water purification, and defense systems powered by undersea volcanic openings. The population of Rapture, numbering in the thousands during the early 1950s, was composed of those people Ryan viewed as the best examples of mankind.
To build a city at the bottom of the sea, insanity. But where else could we be free from the clutching hand of the parasites? Where else could we build an economy that they would not try to control, a society that they would not try to destroy? It was not impossible to build Rapture at the bottom of the sea. It was impossible to build it anywhere else.
However, a scientific discovery upset the balance of the society. Two scientists, a young, brilliant, but naive Bridget Tenenbaum and the morally defunct and opportunistic Dr. Yi Su-chung, studying squid-like creatures dwelling deep in the reefs, discovered a species of sea slug that could secrete stem cells. These could be used to enhance one's body, improving physical or mental capabilities, curing diseases, and healing injuries.
I saw one of the smugglers having a game of catching on the docks today, and this surprised me because his hands were crippled during the war. He was unloading the barge the other day when he was bitten from the sea slug. He woke up the next morning and he found he could move his fingers for the first time in years. I asked him if he still had that sea slug, and luck would have it. He did.
Frank Fontaine, a former mobster and young entrepreneur, invested early on in the research to gain control over the material. The substance was dubbed Atom and became so sought after in the society that it became the dominant currency. At first, Andrew Ryan approved of Fontaine and saw him as the evidence of the greatness he had built Rapture to be.
I'll admit Fontaine showed some foresight when he built up the plasmid business, but the man really never understood sales. Hiding those little girls beneath a bushel. I've just seen the preliminary design work on the new plasmid machines, and they're exactly what I wanted. Mark my words. Presented properly, those little sisters are marketing gold.
But as Fontaine gained more and more power, and as his monopoly on Atom threatened the current social structure, Ryan began to grow scared and resentful. As a result, a full-scale genetic arms race broke out between Ryan and Fontaine.
I begged Mr. Ryan to hand Fontaine's heuristics over to Atlas's boys as a peace offering. But the stupid sod won't listen to reason. Instead, he's just splicing his mob up, giving them more and tougher plasmids. There's an arms race on here in Rapture, but it's not about who can build the best guns and the biggest bombs. It's about who can become less of a man and more of a monster.
Fontaine began a smuggling business to the surface world, and because this was illegal, it finally gave Ryan legal ground to attack Fontaine. Ryan had Fontaine killed in a shootout, but it was too late to reverse the changes Fontaine had brought. During the war, it was discovered that Atom could be used to modify one's body, largely thanks to the efforts of Dr. Steinman and Dr. Suchong. Another form of Atom, known as Eve, was developed. Where Atom adapted the body to use plasmids, Eve was used to power them. The populace had combined technology and mutations to adapt and survive, but during the conflict, all natural sources of Atom were destroyed, which eventually resulted in major shifts in the ecology of the city, as all inhabitants had become biologically dependent on Atom to survive.
Strikes me that Fontaine wasn't overly inconvenienced by his own demise. On New Year's Eve, these wretched splicers come streaming out of the poorhouses and stormed the proverbial barricades. Dead rot in the streets, and Johnny and Jamie Citizen are lined up round the block for plasmids. Anything to help fend off the rabble.
Although Fontaine had been supposed to be dead, in reality he had used plasmids to restructure his face and to appear to be a young Irishman. He named his new identity Atlas, and used this identity to stir up popular support against Andrew Ryan.
Never play a man for the short con when you can play him for the long one. Atlas is the longest con of all. Ryan wanted Frank Fontaine dead. I just gave him what he wanted. As Atlas, I got a new face, a clean record, and a fresh start. Now, it's time to take back Rapture.
Popular slogans like "Who is Atlas?" spread throughout Rapture, and Ryan found himself facing a new threat, this time one that he couldn't suppress by his own rules.
But I noticed something spray painted everywhere. Atlas lives. And I don't know what it means, but something tells me it's important to these people.
To subvert Atlas, he slowly began collecting power over the lives of his citizenry, giving up pieces of his ideals, such as completely free markets, further turning the people against him. On New Year's Eve, December 31, 1958, rioting splicers led to the downfall of Rapture's society, and the city fell into a state of disrepair and decay. Ryan took control of the situation and, using scientists who formerly worked for Fontaine like Dr. Suchon and Dr. Tenenbaum, found a way to produce Adam using little girls biologically combined with sea slugs. Their new physiology allowed them to collect Adam from the corpses and reproduce it in triple the original amount.
The augmentation procedure is a success. The slugs alone could not provide enough Adam for serious work, but combined with the hosts, now we have something. The slug is embedded in the lining of the host's stomach, and after the host feeds, we induce regurgitation. And then we have 20, 30 times yield of usable Adam. The problem now is the shortage of hosts. Fontaine says patience, Tannenbaum. Soon, the first home for little sisters will open, and that problem will be solved.
To protect the girls from splicers, heavily genetically modified men in large diving suits were equipped with large drills or rivet guns and psychologically conditioned to guard them. The girls were eventually known as Little Sisters, and their protectors Big Daddies. Everyone needed Adam, and everyone would do anything to get it, and so the city flew into chaos. Ryan, with his new hold on the Adam supply, and backed by Suchon and Tenenbaum's science, took absolute power over the city, forcing Fontaine as Atlas into hiding. Rapture, the utopian city, was transformed into hell by greed, and no one was allowed to leave to the surface. Rapture had fallen. The remaining regular non-spliced humans hid across the city, though nearly all of them were dangerous in one form or another. Fontaine, however, had long before worked with Suchon and Tenenbaum on an ace in the hole. That ace was Jack. During the arms race between Ryan and Fontaine, Ryan had been having an affair with Jasmine Jolene, a stripper in a gentleman's club, Eve's Garden.
Well, if it isn't the long-lost Andrew Ryan. Come here, Tiger. I thought you had forgotten about poor Jasmine, but I am so glad you didn't.
Jolene became pregnant and didn't know what to do with the child.
That creepy Dr. Tenenbaum promised me it wasn't going to be a real pregnancy. They just take the egg out once Mr. Ryan and I had... Well, I needed the money so bad. But I know Mr. Ryan's gonna suss it out. Gonna know I wasn't being careful. Gonna know I sold the... Mr. Ryan's gonna be so mad at me.
Fontaine discovered this through his many sources, and bought the growing fetus from Jolene. Andrew Ryan discovered soon after, and killed her in a rage.
I'm sorry, Mr. Ryan. I didn't know. I didn't know Fontaine had something to do with it. What are you doing? No, don't, please. I loved you, don't, please, no.
Fontaine had Dr. Tenenbaum and Dr. Suchong genetically and psychologically modify the child as he was grown at an accelerated rate. To protect his investment, Fontaine sent the boy, now a man, to the surface world where he lived a fake life with fake memories. He remained a sleeper agent until Fontaine, now the desperate Atlas, finally activated him. Controlled by the phrase, "Would you kindly," Jack hijacked the plane, crashed it near the entrance to Rapture, promptly forgot what he'd done, and from then on out was controlled by Atlas in an effort to finally kill Ryan.